Hey there, Mike Robbins here. Oh, it's good to be with you. If you're joining live here on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, feel free to just drop a hello in the chat or in the comments to let me know where you are and how you're doing. If you're watching the video this after as well, I want to talk a bit more today about mental health. I'm back here doing social media lives and doing my podcast again and sending out my email newsletter. I took a couple months off over the summer, really, among other things, to kind of care for my own mental health as best as possible. Hey, Penny, nice to see you. Hope things are good in Ontario, Canada. And look, over the course of the spring, especially, I was talking more about mental health on my podcast and here on social media. And it feels to me like it's continues to be really important for us to talk about mental health and the fact that it's okay to not be okay. Over the summer, I was watching, among other things, the Olympics and was really taken by the whole situation that happened with Simone Biles, the incredible gymnast. Hey, Anthony, hope things are good in Montclair, New Jersey. The gymnast from the US who, multiple medalists. And, she ended up having some mental health challenges, and I forget what they called it, the spins or the twisties or something, but she wasn't able to perform at the level she needed to perform, and she sat out for much of the gymnastics competition. And it was really interesting to watch people react to that, to her as an athlete, to her as a woman, to her as a woman of color, but also just in general, the way we expect athletes to perform at a certain level. And I ended up watching the documentary that Michael Phelps, the great Olympic swimmer, made. And Michael was in Tokyo for the Olympics and had a lot of really interesting things to say in response to what happened with Simone Biles. And it just got me thinking more. Hey, Hamish, good to see you. Hope things are good down in New Zealand. And Ray, good to see you. B as well. Nice to see you all joining here on Facebook. And again, if you're on LinkedIn or on YouTube or even on Facebook, as we're getting lots of comments. Marion from South Africa, nice. Again, feel free if you have a question or a comment or a response to anything that I'm talking about. I love having this opportunity to have a bit of a dialogue. But what are some things that you're struggling with right now, mentally, emotionally? I think for me, in going into the summer, I think like a lot of us, I thought we were kind of rounding the corner and things were coming to an end with respect to COVID. And obviously the Delta variant and some other aspects of what's happened with the spike in cases, at least here in the US and other places in the world, has changed that. And a lot of the clients, the companies that we work with who were planning on opening their offices back up again, technology companies and others where people have been working from home, that's been stalled and pushed back to the first of the year, or now I'm hearing people say maybe not till next spring, and whatever it is. I mean, look, none of us know exactly, but I think that I've been struggling just sort of realizing the impact of all of this in this 18 months of being in COVID. And even though I am grateful that like our girls are back in school and there are aspects of life that are coming back to more normal, I've traveled a little bit and done a few in-person engagements, which I have kind of mixed feelings about. But I just think there's a weariness to the length of this and the intensity. And even though we've all gotten more used to it, and I feel less acutely anxious about COVID, maybe it's because I'm vaccinated, maybe it's because it's been a number of months and I've gotten more used to it, but I feel more tired and more weary, not just sort of physically and practically, but mentally, emotionally. And there's a lot going on for a lot of us. And Penny, I appreciate you sharing a bit about your grief. I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your spouse. And now it sounds like the loss of your father just last week. Oh my goodness. After being married for 45 years and seeing someone struggle and then pass away and then having your father, I mean, that's a lot of compound grief for you specifically, Penny. And for many of us, as we deal with, even if we haven't lost a spouse or a parent or someone close to us to COVID or otherwise, just to experience the amount of things that we've all lost over the past 18 months, and then the collective grief that's going on, and having experienced quite a bit of grief in my own life, the loss of my father. It's going to be 20 years this December. And my mother, it's been a little over 10 years. And then my sister Lori, it's coming up on 6 years since they've all passed away. And I think reminding ourselves that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to feel sad, to feel scared, to feel angry, to feel lonely, even if we have people close to us. And I think, I was listening to a podcast this morning, Glennon Doyle's great podcast, We Can Do Hard Things, where she's usually on with her sister Amanda and her wife Abby. I highly recommend it if you haven't listened to Glennon's podcast or aren't familiar with her books and her work and her blog. And amazing, just such a truth teller and such a powerful voice. Ray, I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your twin last year and your two older brothers 3 years ago. I mean, yeah, a lot of grief. But one of the things I was hearing and listening to this morning as I was listening to Glennon's podcast, she was talking about feelings and how, part of her story is that she's, a recovering alcoholic and drug addict and bulimic. And part of what she learned through the recovery process was that feelings are to be felt, all of them, not just the good ones. And we live in a culture, at least here in America and maybe other places in the world, that puts such a focus and a emphasis on happiness. And not that there's anything wrong with being happy. I love being happy. And my part of my own journey in life is to how do I create more happiness, more joy, more fulfillment for myself? How do I create environments for my family and other people where they can experience joy and happiness and fulfillment? And part of being human is that we experience sadness and grief and loss and anger and jealousy and rage and frustration and disappointment and all of the more quote unquote negative emotions. But we have this weird hierarchy of emotions where we think happiness and love and gratitude and fulfillment are the positive ones. And then, sadness and fear and anger and disappointment and jealousy, they're the negative ones. So we're trying to eliminate the negative ones and accentuate the positive ones. But that's not the way that it works. And so much of depression, so much of anxiety, so much of our mental health challenge is actually the denial of our emotions. Think of how many behaviors we take on in life that are a response to not wanting to feel what there is to feel. We eat too much, we drink too much, we work too much, we get addicted to things, we numb out watching Netflix or YouTube videos or whatever, right? And again, any of those things in moderation can be fine. It's just when we're avoiding feeling, I'm feeling that sense of powerlessness that most of us are experiencing these days. I'm feeling that sense of loneliness, of disappointment, of sadness, of grief, of fear. So instead of just allowing myself to feel those things, what do? We numb it out. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to do some work. Right? Even the positive activities, different from, doing drugs or drinking or overeating or things that are seen as more negative, they're all avoidance techniques. So, what if we could just acknowledge where we're at? Right? Ray, congratulations on 35 years being sober next week. That's amazing. And think of all the work you've had to do over those 35 years for yourself and with others. Susan, I hear you about being, struggling to get motivated and get active and healthy, right? I mean, one of the things that, I've gained a decent amount of weight during COVID, and it's been a real challenge. I went to the doctor yesterday, and we were talking a little bit about I did a sleep study because I've been snoring and having some challenges sleeping and trying to figure out what that is. And I have a mild aspect of sleep apnea, I found out. And so we're talking it through. And basically he said, look, sometimes if you gain weight, that can impact your sleep and impact your snoring. So of the few things he recommended was to lose some weight. And it wasn't done with shame or ridicule or body shaming or any of that. And I think many of us during COVID have found ourselves hunkered down, right, Susan, to what you're talking about, and eating and watching TV and doing things and, managing ourselves as best as we can. And on the one hand, I think it's important that we have compassion for ourselves all the way around. And on the other hand, to acknowledge what Susan's talking about is it's hard to get motivated. I find it hard often, and especially these days, to get motivated to work, to get motivated to be healthy. And look, I'm essentially a motivational speaker. That's what I do for a living. So, and I think, again, acknowledging, and Marion, I'm sorry to hear about your brother passing away. And I think sometimes it's like embracing the challenge, the struggle, the difficulty, knowing that, hey, I'm having a hard time. I lost my brother 11 months ago, not as an excuse, but just like a reality of my life. One of my favorite books is by Don Miguel Ruiz. He wrote the book, The Four Agreements. And one of the agreements of the four is that we agree to do the best we can, to always do our best. And as he talks about in that sweet book, and it's so short and sweet and to the point, but brilliant and wise and deep, he talks about that doing the best we can is going to be different if we're healthy versus if we're sick. It's going to be different based on what's going on around us. And I think, it's such an interesting paradox. There's that whole metaphor of, are we a thermometer or are we a thermostat? Meaning, like, if you're a thermometer, you're just sort of telling what the temperature is in the room. If you're a thermostat, you're dictating it. You're changing the temperature, hot, more cold, whatever. And the idea, and again, in the motivational speaking, and you can do it and be empowered and world, it's like, be a thermostat, not a thermometer. But the reality is we're always a little bit of both, aren't we? We're taking the temperature of what's going on around us. When it's stormy outside, that's going to have an impact versus when it's sunny. When the people in our family are doing well and thriving, that's going to have an impact versus when they're not. When we're physically feeling better and healthier and getting more rest and caring for our bodies. Now, again, there's things we can do, but it's like, if you trip and fall and break your leg and then you can't walk for weeks or months at a time, that's going to have an impact on you, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. When there's a global pandemic in the world and a lot of strife politically, socially, economically, otherwise, those things are going to impact us if we're paying attention, if we're open, if we're feeling. So again, we don't want to use it as an excuse, but at the same time, it's important to acknowledge what's going on. And I think these days, even if you're doing relatively well and things are going relatively well in your life and you're doing well, your family's safe and things, your work's steady. And I mean, you check all the boxes of all the things, I'm not moving, I'm not going through a divorce, I haven't just had a loss in my family, everybody's healthy, nobody's sick, I have steady income, I can take care of myself. I think collectively, you have to be asleep not to be feeling what's been going on and continues to go on. And then for many of us, there's one, if not multiple aspects of our lives where things might be in a minor or more major crisis right now. And most of the people that I know, including myself, aren't really playing with a full deck. And I say all of that just as an acknowledgement of, can we have more compassion for ourselves? Can we be kinder and gentler with ourselves? If things aren't okay or we're not doing okay, can we tell the truth about that? Make peace with ourselves that we're in a tough spot, reach out for support, because there's so much support around us. We just have to be willing to acknowledge that we're struggling and or that we need some help. It is always okay to not be okay. And I think sometimes we know that as it relates to other people, right, Ray? It's learning to love ourselves the way we love others. To speak to ourselves as if we're speaking to someone that we love. If someone comes to us and tells us they're really struggling and they could use our help and support, or they really need some help and support, 99 times out of 100, if not 999 times out of 1,000, we are right there to support them in whatever way we can without judgment. When we think of doing that with others, we often think, oh, they'll judge me, or they'll laugh at me, they'll criticize me, they won't help me, I'll get rejected, it'll be terrible, I'll look weak, it'll be bad, all the different reasons. Understandable in a lot of cases, just not helpful. So check in with yourself. forgive yourself, have compassion for yourself, and in so doing for others. Everyone's doing the best they can all the time. And right now, in a lot of cases, our best may not be that great. And I say that with love and compassion. I feel like right now we're at some point in a very, very long season, like in sports, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, soccer, whatever the sport you follow. It's towards, hopefully we're more towards the end than the beginning of the season. We don't even know when the season ends. But like in every sport, most of the players, as the season wears on, aren't 100%. They're a little banged up. They're a little tired. They're a little weary, right? But the games matter, and they matter more as the season goes on. And we have to figure out how to dig deep. And if you're really injured and really hurt, you got to stay out of the game. You got to go see the doctor. You got to go see the trainer. You got to get some intervention on the injury. But if you're healthy enough to play, even if you're not 100%, you can still play the game without excuses, but just aware of the fact, hey, I'm not as fresh as I was at the beginning of this season. I'm doing the best I can. So be kind to yourself, be kind to the people around you. I'll see you next week. I have some fun, exciting things to announce next week, so I hope you'll join me again. I think I'll come on live Tuesday and maybe Thursday as well. But if you're watching the video of this after, feel free to leave a comment or a question or just share anything. And if you did leave comments, as many of you did here on Facebook, thank you so much for joining live. Let me know if you have suggestions for future episodes of this. Hopefully you're connected to my podcast. We're all in this together, and signed up for my email newsletter, which you can do at mike-robbins.com. Be well. See you soon. Take care.